call the Johnson City Council work session number 24-09 to order. City roll call, please.
Johnson. Here. Martin.
Here.
Ready. Here. Burkhart.
Here.
Evans.
First item on the agenda this evening is a presentation of the findings on the Johnson Sanitary Sewer Master Study. Matt.
Good evening, council and mayor. I have with me tonight Rachel Kranz from FOTH, who performed a bulk of the study. And once we get the PowerPoint up here, apologize for that, we will get started. A little background on the study is we haven't performed a master study of our entire sanitary sewer system for the past 20 years. So this was quite the undertaking. With that, our existing collection system services over 24,000 people and continues to grow. We have a daily average flow of just over 2 million gallons. We also have just roughly under 400,000 lineal feet of sanitary sewer. With that, that ranges anywhere from 4-inch up to 42-inch in gravity main. And then we have roughly about 67,000 feet of force main, which ranges anywhere from 2 inches to 10 inches. With that, we have 6 active lift stations with 2 more planned in our northwest growth area. And our waste discharges to the Des Moines Metropolitan Wastewater Reclamation Authority, or the WRA. Can I control that from? Thank you. Next page. The sewer study goals, we took an existing system assessment based on the Thrive 2040 comp plan to look at future flows. We also did some hydraulic modeling of the current system and the anticipated growth area. We also looked at capital improvement plan along with that project or with that plan, and looking at reduction of inflow and infiltration. So when we get rainfall events that get into our system, that's water that we pay for or gets metered that we pay for that isn't, that we don't bill out for during water use, but we do have to pay for it in sewer. We also looked at fixing capacity issues where we may have some undersized pipes. We looked at addressing aging infrastructure as we continue to grow and age. And then we looked at the unsewered areas in town that we currently have, such as east of Merle Hay. We've got some area that is south of 70th, and then again south of 54th over in our Roughwood neighborhood. And then we looked at future expansion up into the northwest growth area. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Rachel. She'll talk about some of the findings and some of the interesting and unique things that we found during the study.
Thank you, Matt. Good evening. I have gotten to dive in a bit, shall we say, to the local Senate. Oh, it's not as bad as you think, Mayor.
Take your word for it.
Yes, very much. So we started off this study by looking at the existing system and trying to understand what condition things are in today. And we have a few tools that we use in order to help us see what's happening underground. And one big one is CCTV or televising, if you've heard Matt talk about that previously. So we have videos that we can go and look at to help us see what's happening underground, whether it be the condition of pipe, but also condition of manholes too, we can see that. And we also visited the 6 lift stations in town to get information on what those existing conditions are. And we also installed flow meters in several locations around town to get a what's happening today idea of flow conditions. So we did go out to all 6 lift station sites. We reviewed the record drawing information that the city has available, and then we documented what is existing at the stations today, taking pictures of the sites. And then also we created a standard document for all 6 lift stations to record and have easy access for Matt and crew in order to be able to look at what's happening at the lift stations and what information is available for them. Here are a few pictures that we collected at one of the lift stations and just documenting existing conditions, what the pumps look like, what the meter valves, the valve vaults look like, and what's happening within control panels. So just a little sample for you to see. Then we took the approach of doing flow metering. We had 4 flow meters that we installed in 3 different phases throughout town, looking at a total of 12 locations. At each site, we had them in for 30 days, and evaluation was from March 3rd through the end of May. It should be May 30th. In addition to wet weather conditions, meaning rain, it can also include snow melt in the spring. So depending on how dry things were in the fall before, how saturated ground conditions were dry last year, very wet this spring now. So these were things that we can use these as tools to evaluate. So we were able to break the city up looking at different meter basins. So what you're seeing in the different colors here represents the service areas upstream of the temporary meters that we had installed. So the first phase, we looked at the area west of Beaver Creek. This all flows to the WRA West meter. These meters were installed from March 3rd through April 1st. And we could get a snapshot of what's happening in that 30-day period for those particular areas, looking at the different types of land uses and how the flows look for those areas. Phase 2, we took a broader approach to the area west of Beaver Creek, looked at that entire basin that you see in the orange, and then also looked at a few other areas throughout the community in order to monitor the conditions through there. And we took a look as well at the low pressure system and the contributions of the flows when they enter the gravity system off of Northwest Beaver Drive. The final phase of metering was primarily east of Merle Hay Road. All of the flow contributes to and is metered at the WRA East meter. So we could look at that data and get a very good picture of what's happening on the eastern side of town. So wet weather events, as we talked about a little bit, it includes both snow melt in the spring as well as rain conditions. So there are a couple key things here that I would like to share with you. When we look at this flow data, there are 2 big components of what you hear for I&I. We have inflow, which is direct contribution. And you can see highlighted on the graph here that initial spike from the rain event. It's high, it will be immediate. It is direct connections. That can be anything from a manhole casting that got shifted to the side and is letting water flow right in, or a building that connected a rain spout, the rain drains directly to the sanitary system. As Matt mentioned, it's clean water entering the system that has to get pumped or paid for when it enters the WRA system, and we don't want the city to incur those costs. Another component of I&I is the infiltration. So exactly as the term implies, it is wet, it's rainwater or runoff that is melting or through rainfall events, filtering down through the soil and entering through cracks in the pipe, joints that have become open over time through settlement. So that will be a lag condition. It takes time for that rainwater, that snow melt to get through the soil before it can enter into the system. Inflow is pretty easy to find. Infiltration can be a bit of a chasing game because there are so many factors that contribute to that. Once those 2 leave the system, you'll see the flow curves and the flow conditions return to normal. So I have one wet weather event I'd like to show you, but it is 2 different conditions I want to take a look at. So this wet weather event was a 3-inch rainfall that occurred on March 22nd when we were metering. The basin that you're seeing the data for here is the basin shown in orange, which is everything to the west of Beaver Creek. And you can see we have a spike when the rainfall event occurs, but there's also a significant lag in the flow conditions where you can see it's higher over a period of time. So that would indicate that we have more infiltration in this area than we do inflow. So that would be something that the city can watch for, be aware of, but it is more challenging to find those things within a sanitary sewer system. Here is kind of a fun one to see because this is one that can be found relatively quickly in terms of the fact that this is an inflow condition. This is the same 3-inch rainfall event. You can see we have an immediate spike in flow during that event, but it drops right back down to regular, your average flow conditions. So this is something that the city can do some investigations and try to pinpoint where this is located, and it would be comparatively a bit of an easier fix. Kind of like patching a hole in an air mattress compared to just trying to find that little small. Yes,
I just have a question. So looking at that chart
yes.
and so when you have a spike like that, does that mean it's more of an indication of a manhole that's open?
So it can be a manhole that could be open. It could be a manhole that's maybe in a low-lying condition with a lid that's not sealing very tightly. It could also be a sump pump that might drain directly into the sanitary sewer instead of coming up to the ground and draining out that way. So there are a few items that are characteristic of this type of condition that the city can pursue to just,
Okay.
yeah.
As opposed to, like you talked about somebody, a business or somebody that the drains are running off into that. I mean, that would peak every time, right?
It would peak every time, correct?
As opposed to a one-off event would indicate that the system is working, but then that one time it would fail.
Yes.
Is that fair?
You would witness this during any rainfall event. Obviously, we had a 3-inch rainfall here, so that did make a big difference. If you have a manhole, for example, that's in a low-lying area, it might flood during a 3-inch rainfall event, but it may not flood during a 1-inch rainfall event. But those are great things to look for.
I have a question.
Yes,
Besides the tremendous spike there in the middle,
yes.
the other lines, the meter flow and the average daily flow, are very similar. Does that mean the rest of the system is pretty tight?
It does. It's a wonderful thing for the city. So the sanitary system within Johnston is actually quite young. So the pipes are fairly new when you consider the materials used. So that means that the system is tighter. We do see a very slight increase right after the rainfall event here, but overall the system looks really good, really good.
So what is I mean, most a sewer system is PVC pipe, is that right? Or what is I get maybe a better way to say, what is the typical lifespan of the piping that is used in the sanitary system in Johnston?
So industry standard rule of thumb is 50 years. And that is what a lot of the pipe manufacturers will warranty. However, there are different conditions where if you have poor soils and that type of thing, or there were issues during construction with backfilling, you'll start to see settlement of the pipe itself, and that can open up joints and that type of thing, which would allow that infiltration to enter the system. But overall, the pipe itself, you can assume an average of 50 years.
Great, thank you.
Yes. Any other questions? Okay, we can move on to the next slide. So with the help of the city GIS department, we were able to create a hydraulic model of the city. So this is basically a copy, an electronic copy of the city's sanitary system so that we could run models of it and run simulations to see what happens as the city continues to grow and develop. We used a program called Bentley Sewer Gems, and we modeled different flow conditions. A key here is we used the flow meter data that we had collected to calibrate this model. So we could say, based on the data that we measured and what we found, this is more true than just using an industry standard or some generic formula. We were able to use data directly from the city. We also use this model to help us look into the future based on the Thrive 2040 land use and development. So that helped us build and see a picture for the future. We were able to look at both average daily flows and peak flows, both of which are requirements for us in terms of sanitary sewer design. Looking out to 2040, using the Thrive 2040 land use types and acreages of those different types that are proposed in that report, we also looked at population growth rates and used those to establish 3 milestones between now and 2040, just to help give the city some guidelines of when to watch for things as the city continues to develop. So we looked at 2028, 2034, and 2040. You'll see on the map here, there are 5 profiles that are identified. I know they're tiny. We'll look at them a little bit more closely. But these are 5 locations that the city is going to want to monitor between now and 2040 based on growth to understand the impacts to capacity. One of the areas, and I'm going to talk about these in order of capacity impact, not necessarily in order of where they are in the system. So one area, we've identified it as profile 2. It is near 86th and 70th, looking at an area where we anticipate, because of the growth. Now, I will say this also depends on conversations with neighboring communities and developers, because if the land use types change or the areas to be developed change, it changes what we anticipated for the 2040 flow conditions. So based on this information that we had available from Thrive 2040, we could see that by the year 2034, this particular area is going to start to have capacity issues. So we provided information related to equivalent population and equivalent area, so that as development occurs, the city has some parameters that they can watch to guide what happens as we move forward.
Can I just ask you a real quick question about, because if you go back to that.
Yes.
So the map that's in the kind of upper left-hand corner,
Yes.
so that's not north-south, it should be,
North is to your left.
right, okay.
Yes,
So, okay.
it is. It rotated so we could
No,
see
that's
it.
fine, and I get that, I just want to make sure I understood how it was.
You are
laid out.
correct.
Okay.
Yes. You'll see that on the next ones that come up as
That's
well.
all, yeah.
Thank you. So profile 4 is another area that we are looking at future capacities to be monitored as growth occurs in the northwest portion of the city. So an recurring theme through here as we look at the primary trunk line that feeds the areas west of Beaver Creek.
Just to acclimate everybody, this is 62nd Avenue. This kind of runs into the Augustine neighborhood. Court Havens building, just on the west side of.
Thank you, Matt. By the time that we move into 2040 and we see that future Thrive 2040 development within the community, we have 3 more areas that the city should be monitoring and continuing to look at. So as you can see on the maps, the area that this pipe receives flow from is all shown in the yellowish orange, and looking at 3 different pipe segments to monitor, be aware of the flow conditions through that area. Another profile to look at, same situation. This is in the Augustine neighborhood, looking at future flow increasing through this pipe and wanting to monitor it and understand, the impacts of the development upstream. And finally, further south toward the ball fields in the park, there's one more stretch that we should be monitoring and being cognizant of the flow conditions through the pipe.
Quick question for you.
Yes.
That equivalent population then, that's the future growth of the whole city or for that area?
That is just the future growth of the area that this pipe serves. So the area that you see shown in the purple.
Let me try to understand this.
Yes,
So milestone 3, 2040, say the equivalent population is 25,996. I'm saying this. So somebody answer this question properly for me. Are you saying that's the population that growth you see, or is that the, you think, I'm not formulating this correctly?
I believe that's the population inside the shaded area, so that's the entire northwest growth area,
Oh,
as well as what's already populated south. Is that
that is correct. Yes.
so
So the equivalent population would represent everyone that lives upstream of this particular location.
Okay.
Yep. So as the city continues to grow and a developer approaches the city and says, I want to put in 50 new units in this neighborhood, that gives you an idea of how many more, what that equivalent population would be upstream for that additional development, for example.
okay. My question here is, our current population is about 24,000,
Yes.
and you're saying that by 2040 it will double that.
Based
Just
on the
that
Thrive,
area only?
based on the Thrive 2040 plan, we anticipate an annual 4% increase in population.
Okay, that's probably high, okay. But thanks for that.
Yes. Yes. Any other questions on this?
So is that an existing, currently an existing sanitary sewer line that would have to be replaced? Or
Yes. So all of these profiles that we've talked about so far are existing pipes.
that are undersized?
Either, yes, undersized or slope conditions too, but yes, if the
Something about them is not.
yeah, if the city continues to develop the way that Thrive 2040 has projected, these 5 areas are going to be the primary ones that you want to just keep an eye on.
And because they're in areas that are already developed, although some of them are kind of, it's sort of, the cost will have to be borne internally on the system in some ways, as opposed to by new development.
Yes, this would be, yes,
correct?
yes. Thank you, Matt.
It's also safe to assume and understand that mitigating one or two of these areas in the profile doesn't necessarily, we're only able to handle as much as our smallest line, correct? So,
Yes.
so while we have those pressure points, kind of what I'm going to call upstream,
Yes,
to some extent, even if you increased or expanded those or somehow mitigated the concern there, you still have to face the problematic areas, perhaps at profile 5 or whatever, which is one of our southernmost areas.
that is correct.
Okay.
Yes, yes. Although they are part of a continuous system, what we do at one will not fix what happens at another.
Perfect.
Yes,
Well said. Thank you.
you're welcome. We use this information looking at the system into the future, looking at what has already been planned within the city for improvements to help create a capital improvement plan. What you're seeing here is a distribution of that plan over time in terms of spend. This helps the city plan for anticipated costs. We didn't talk about it in much detail, but as part of the lift station inspections, we also did evaluations of them and lift station maintenance and upgrades in terms of replacements based on life of the system. They're included in these costs as well. But this document is intended to be a living document, a tool for you. So as you make decisions on what priorities the city wants to approach first, what projects that you want to tackle, this can be modified to help the city move forward. This is just a little snap. I know it can be difficult to read, but it just gives you an idea of the items that are included in here. Collection system capital improvements, that would be the 5 profiles that we talked about. Also looking at other recommended projects within the system, routine maintenance, lift station maintenance, lift station capital improvements, and also maintaining that hydraulic model so you always have a live picture of what's happening within the city.
One of the things I did want to point out, back, sorry, that you do see the 5 areas that we kind of drew attention to may have capacity issues, but that really depends on how quickly the northwest growth area expand, how much we have expansion up there, as well as, you know, that took in all of 2040 Thrive Plan. So if that area is reduced or impacted, then we may go down from 5 areas to 2 or 3. So, but it's something that we need to keep an eye on, that we wanted to point out based on the 2040 Thrive Plan. So just want to thank everybody.
Matt, while you're right here, does the, did this study presume that the east of Merle Hay, project would be completed? In other words, there's nothing that would flow toward the east meter that would end up in a kind of watching profile or a profile we need to watch?
No, because it'll actually connect to east of Merle Hay that was already constructed south of 62nd. So that will connect to that, which goes to the west.
Oh, it goes to the west meter.
It goes east?
It goes east.
Okay.
With that additional, the currently unsewered areas,
Yes.
that would all flow to the east meter, and there are no capacity concerns within that area.
Fantastic.
Yes. Yeah.
Any other questions, council?
Matt, you had mentioned, so there's a couple of streets kind of in the northwest part of town around 70th Avenue. Is there plans at some point to extend sewer to those areas, or how does that?
Yeah,
what's the-
so it's in our CIP right now. It's called the Bright Trunk Sewer. And that would run a trunk main down the Bright Sewer drainage way that would pick up 98th, 95th, and 93rd Street, which are the 3 streets south of 70th that are unsewered. Now, that is just the trunk main to be able to collect those. The actual projects for 98th, 95th, and 93rd are not.
And then how does that, there's probably a cost, is there a cost sharing that occurs there with the homeowners, or how does that work? Or do we put the main in and then they have to?
It would be similar to east of Merle Hay,
Okay.
where there'd be a connection fee to that.
Okay.
Any other questions, council?
Mayor, I have just one more. You started the presentation by kind of talking about the study with regard to visual inspection, the cameras. You talked about the flow meters. I first want to talk about the camera from the standpoint of you identified a root ball, for instance, and roots
Sure.
growing in cracks.
Yes.
I mean, were there discoveries made of things that need to happen urgently? In other words, I don't know, to some extent, there's a part of me that says, oh, if there's roots in there, that's bad. But at the same point, if you grind out or kill whatever vegetation is in there, then you're left with a more porous type material. Cracks, on the other hand, allow that immediate either infiltration or that inflow.
Yeah.
Is there stuff that you have on a short list that is a takeaway from this?
Yes, so what you saw there, the root ball, that's on Pioneer Parkway, that we have a CIP program or programmed in the CIP to address those issues, at least on Pioneer Parkway. You still get the infiltration because it's actually opened the joints up, so you still get the infiltration in those areas. So that's one of them that we knew and is going to be addressed. We didn't CCTV the entire system with this. However, we are going through with our cleaning program, and we would identify areas with our cleaning program as well as we go back through and video behind those folks. So we would be able to identify those areas and then add them to the CIP or have them cut out temporarily if it was bad enough and then plant it in our CIP.
Is it safe to assume from what you stated that root material usually enters the system at a joint?
Yes.
Okay. And then the second question I have real quickly is the metering, the flow meter samples that you took.
Yes.
I presume that we pay WRA based on the full-time always metering on east and west, correct?
Correct.
Our meters that we put in then temporarily to kind of study, do they generally jive with what we're then paying? In other words, could we extrapolate out that the flows that we saw at those different points generally were in line with what we're paying? We're not being overcharged or severely doing something funny with our wastewater. It's going
Yes.
in the right spot.
Yep.
Good.
WRA did provide flow meter data for the time period that we had those temporary meters installed. So they were great to work with in terms of helping us to look at that information.
Matt, do we pay based on a, is it strictly whatever the meter says is what we pay, or similar to CIWW and other things where we have fixed amounts that we have to pay with regard to water treatment?
No, I believe it's per gallon is what we pay.
Right.
Much like what we pay incoming, we pay outgoing.
Okay. But we don't have to commit a certain amount of gallons treated or something like that.
Other questions? Well, Rachel, when we got to the slide talking about the rain events, I have to say that, after 2 years of drought, I don't remember a rain event in 2022.
I know.
But I trust you that did.
Yes.
in fact,
Yeah, it
happen.
was actually a pretty, to your point, Mayor, with it being so dry as it has been, when you get a rain event of 3 inches like that, it wants to just disappear because it wants to just slide across the surface of the soil because the soil is so cracked. And so that is part of why we see that very initial impact, that inflow that we see. So I know, hard to believe that over the last couple of years, we did get a 3-inch rainfall.
And I just want to thank you and Matt as well for taking what some would suggest is kind of a crappy issue and making it interesting and understandable. So thank you for your good work on this.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all your questions.
Yeah, thank you. With that, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is provide an update on the citywide vegetative debris cleanup, and that is still Matt.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, we've got, attached to tonight's packet was just kind of a snapshot of the app that our GIS person, Tyler Danielson at Water Sewer at Public Works, was able to put together to show kind of the widespread debris or vegetative debris that Public Works and Park staff is working to collect. When we get there, you'll see that we've got over 1,800 debris piles that are curbside that we are collecting.
And Matt, before you go any further, I found this map really interesting, but I didn't know what the different colored dots meant.
Changed that, so if we get the new one up,
Okay.
because they were too similar between the yellow and the orange and the red.
But there was
And the
no
key,
legend to tell me what was what.
yep, and the key, it's actually up in the upper right-hand corner, but, so we put that together, and it's very useful for our field staff that is able to go out, take a look and see where we actually have debris piles there. We do have streets marked where we don't have any, so we don't have to waste time driving up and down streets where we don't have debris. We're able to dispatch some staff where we've got smaller piles. We can have a pickup and a Bobcat go out and pick those up versus the larger equipment. We can get those headed to the right direction too. So we almost had it. It's also helpful during the FEMA process for reimbursement, where they're able to see how widespread um, the damage was or the debris is around town. So that way they know that it's not just actually located in one area of town. So that'll come in helpful when we're going through that process. We did start collecting vegetative debris on May 28th, the day after Memorial Day. The first week was short week. It was slow. We had a piece of equipment the first day out, breakdown, and we got it back operational the very next day. And like I said, as you can see, we do have a lot of debris that's out there, ranging from those small piles all the way up to some large piles there. Along with that collection, we started working our way east from the Public Works facility, working our way west. With that, now that was last week, so we really kind of focused on the area east of Merle Hay. We've still got a little bit of work over here to do. With that, we had to shift gears this week, so we shifted gears over to Pioneer Parkway in anticipation of Green Days in a week and a half, 2 weeks starting. So we moved into the Green Meadows neighborhood this week. This will help allow parks to mow medians and get that area looking really nice for Green Days. One of the things that we've thought forward is we're going to lose access to our stockpile area because it's down at Terra Park. When once the carnival moves in, starts to set up, we'll lose access to that. So we've reached out to Camp Dodge. They're kind enough to work with us. They're going to allow us to a spot to store some vegetative debris for a few days while we lose access, and then we'll start stockpiling back at Terra Park. With that, we've also gone to voluntarily 10-hour days. So we've got staff working 10-hour days versus 8-hour days this week. We'll look at where we're at the end of the week and see if we want to extend that for another week to get the debris collected in a much quicker time. So with that, we're anticipating about another 2.5 weeks. Hopefully by council meeting next time, I can tell you that we're either done or that we are almost done and should be completed within that week. So quick brief update there. Are you able to zoom in on Greendale Road, just Ashland? So that you can see that the app has been updated. Now it's color coded, a little easier to read. You've got the pie chart over here to the side that tells you how many we've got. If you click on Ashland there, it's that next one up right there. So if you click on one of those red piles, it's kind of cool what Tyler did for us. So they went out, they actually snapped a shot of the debris pile, so that'll aid. If you do click on a blue one and a green one on that same street, you can kind of see the difference between the large and the small piles. And we've got the blue ones or green ones are the smaller piles. So we do have some extremely small piles out there. Some of them can fit in garbage cans, but they're still sitting on the curb. But we'll get them collected. So anyway, I just wanted to give a brief update. Happy to answer any questions.
Also have any questions for Matt?
Did you say this is public?
No. Thank you. I'll pass that along to staff.
The work of staff has been extraordinary, so
They have.
everyone stepped up and have made us all proud.
So Matt, I do have one question about the larger piles. And I haven't, as I've driven around town, none of the piles that I've seen are so big. Like, let's say you have a big pile and it's right at a corner. It could hard block your line of sight. So most of the piles I've seen are a little smaller than the ones, but I didn't know if there's been any thought or concern about if there's a really large pile that could potentially be an vision obstruction to address those. So just, if that's something you guys have given any thought to, or
Generally, I mean, we take those kind of on a complaint basis if there is, or if we're out driving around and we see something.
right.
Um, if we get a call that there is an obstruction, we'll have staff go out, take a look at it, and then if we need to address it, we will. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Last item on the agenda is a discussion on the reclassification compensation plan and associated salary administration policy.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, as council is well aware, we've been working as a city on developing a new classification and compensation study for some time. Actually, back in February of last year, we entered into a contract with Carlson Detman Consulting to assist the city in this process. The consultant actually was here back in March of this year to present the report and study to the council. After that, we as staff and through discussions with the HR Finance Committee, really wanted to go through a process to verify and kind of support the plan, just make sure that we are addressing staff concerns about it. So one of the steps that we've taken is to go through and get salary information from metro communities, for larger, for smaller in Johnston, really just to compare them to the ranges that were developed by the classification and compensation consultant. Based on that, really the vast majority of the positions really were classified very appropriately. We do have some positions that there are not comparable, so those are hard to make comparisons to. But then we do have a subset of positions. There was 5 positions that we felt needed to be adjusted higher based on market condition, and 6 positions that needed to be adjusted lower because of market conditions. Now, I would say that of the 6 positions that are being adjusted lower, all of them still have a higher range that is higher than what currently their ranges are. Additionally, for those 6 positions, none of them are going to see a pay cut because of this. I think those are some of the fears that you get worried about. In reality, no position within the city will see ultimately a pay cut. Now, there are 56 individuals within the pay plan itself, and I would note that 50 out of the 56 will actually see a higher range based on this work than what they currently have in their current ranges. But of those 6 that won't have a higher range, they're still not at top of pay. They're not going to see a pay cut. Again, things that people are worried about. With all that said, I think we're now in a position with this work session item. We've actually the tables were included in there. We're in a position now that we're comfortable with it. We're happy to answer any questions, but we think we're in a position that we can move forward and adopt those. And with that said, once council does adopt that, that is really just really the beginning. There's a next step process that we see happening. We see that there'll be an appeal process that would occur, really to give individuals the opportunity to raise questions and provide additional data to maybe make additional adjustments that need to be appropriately made. So we would envision that individuals would have a 30-day period to make that appeal. Internal staff would review that information, meet with the individual department director to discuss that, and then some of those would then be forward to the classification compensation consultant to review and to come back with some recommendations to the council at that point. We'd envision the entire process would take 60 to 90 days to complete from beginning to end. Is there any questions on that first part of the classification and compensation work?
I have a question.
Yeah.
The appeal process, how much of the fact finding is going to be left to the employee? Let's say they're appealing their position and they feel that some of their work was not properly recognized.
Yep.
How much does the employee have to do study-wise to figure out what a appropriate salary is? Yeah, I'm a little worried that if they have to go out and do research
Yeah.
across Iowa on trying to find comparable, positions, that's gonna be tough. What, I mean, uh, how, do you see any issues with that in terms of the 30 days?
I don't think so. And additionally, what I would say is, employees should reach out, talk with their department director, talk with Cindy or myself. We have some resources that would certainly help them. One of our tools that we use for the HR world actually has job descriptions from multiple cities around the state. I actually used that when we were writing an assistant city administrator position. So you can find a lot of position descriptions very quickly through that tool. So we can make their life a lot easier. We don't want this to be a heavy lift for anyone. So I think part of that is it's going to be communicating and having those discussions up front.
That would be good. Thank you.
Kind of along those lines, Mike, would the employee have available to them information that the department heads looked at to come to a conclusion?
Yeah, and in fact, we've shared that with department directors. We're happy to share that with employees too. So I'm just looking at this attachment, and it says it's the May 31st, 2024, fit to the 75th. Yes. So can you kind of the minimum and maximum? That's pretty straightforward. The control point. What is the control point? And I'm going to ask Cindy this because she knows this a little bit more into them than I do.
So if you remember, sorry, I'll try to move so you can kind of see me. If you remember in our current performance management system that we use, it's called the decision band making or method, decision band method process. The intent with that was to get everyone to what that consultant deemed the market rate, which was that middle point. That's what the majority of the market was at. In this new proposed system, we talked early on in the process about getting everybody to market is not necessarily a great recruitment or retainment philosophy. So instead of thinking about that midpoint as 50th to 50th percentile, we essentially went to the 62nd percentile. That's what that 50 to 75. It's again, science or art, not science. So 62 is about where we came in. So we're not the middle, we're not the top, we're not the bottom. We're slightly above the middle to the top. So that's what that control point is, Councilmember Cope. It's about 62% of what the quote unquote market rate is.
But so it obviously it's not right in the middle of the minimum and the maximum, right?
Correct.
And actually, in some ways, it looks like it skews a little closer to the minimum than it does.
Yeah, the other thing that this,
Or does some it does, and
some it does and some it doesn't. So the other, in the current system, the spread from the minimum to the maximum is 45%. In our current, or in the proposed, it's 35% from the minimum to the maximum. So the range is smaller. Again, part of that recruitment and retention is to get people to the top, to change the philosophy of how we've been doing that. There's some of us who've been here forever. We are not close to the top. So this is a way to kind of progress through that and not such a broad range that the goalpost is moving all of the time.
And one other question for a little bit. So just looking at the chart, and so from a council member standpoint, the positions that I'm most familiar with are obviously the department directors. And so, and it's, as you look at these, if you look at S and R and Q and P, and S, those S, R, Q, and P, those are all different pay ranges for different department directors. And they're not all the same, right? And is that sort of a reflection of the metro? And it's probably a reflection of a lot of things, but in essence, if you're in Q or in P, it's not just where the city of Johnston sort of classifies that as a position. That's sort of a reflection of where those positions would fall in the metro. Is that a fair way to say that? And obviously, and if that's how it falls in the metro, that's probably where those positions would fall in Colorado or Texas or someplace else. Is that a fair statement? I think it's a fair statement. I would say that most metro communities are doing it the way, I believe there's just
actually had all the department directors in one large band. But different philosophy, I can't speak to why they did, that
Okay.
one community did that, but the rest of the metro, the other 7 that we looked at, had them in different categories similar to this.
Great, thank you.
Further questions for Mike?
So that's the first part. The second part is, with this, we are, have a draft policy in here again for discussion, is a salary administration policy. And really, I think first and paramount was this policy really reinforces what we heard from council is to keep, and your strong desire to keep a merit-based plan. So that's what we've done and how this program is laid out. I think from the city's perspective, it also provides us some great guidance so that we can understand what future adjustments we'll do and then what that impact is on our budget so we can do some forecasting multiple years out. For employees, it does provide some guidance and really helps them to understand what they can expect to receive in the future in the way of compensation. Now, one of the issues that this plan also does is we have a real pressure point, and that's regarding how we do hiring. Currently, all hires do have to come to the city council for approval. That does delay the process by several weeks, and especially in a competitive market. We're in a position where we are having a very difficult time recruiting. It just becomes another disincentive for us. So one of the things it's done, as long as the position is both authorized and budgeted, it does move the hiring to the city administrator. Now, this policy, one of the things we will do is we will provide reports in the council packet so you see the hiring, promotions, and then employees that have left service from the city. We'll also provide that to the HR Finance Committee and give a verbal report to them so that they're up to speed on what's happening in that. So the salary administration, that's kind of a broad overview of what that does. I guess I would answer any specific questions the council has.
So would this come back to sort of finalize or officialize your change in the approach? Would this policy or plan come back for council as a resolution? Is that
We
kind of
would.
the
And so this
concept?
would be incorporated into one of the chapters within our personnel handbook.
Okay.
So we would bring this, we'd anticipate in 2 weeks to bring this back for consideration by the council.
I have no concerns with making that change to, I mean, to me, I think that's a reflection of kind of the modern environment where we're in, that those decisions can be sort of in essence made and us kind of, I think it's good for us to be involved in the process to the extent we can, and I think it's been beneficial for us to be involved, especially at the director level and above. I think that's been a good thing. I hope that doesn't discontinue. But I think once the decision is made on who the right candidate is, then I think making that decision as expeditiously as possible is a good thing. And our current process doesn't do that. And this is something that probably should have been fixed a long time ago. So.
And that's a good point. I did review this with Christine and Mike Galloway, our city attorney and HR attorney. They both said when you have city administrative managers in the metro in particular, this is pretty standard. They had no concerns with the policy as it's drafted.
Other questions or comments? Wow.
Thank you.
That was our last agenda item. We have 4 minutes before the regular council meeting. So let's adjourn and we'll come back in 4 minutes.